Hey everybody, it's Damien from Guitar Journey here, and today I want to talk to you about learning your neck, learning your fretboard. This is one of those topics that guitar players just seem to almost obsess over. And I think part of what makes it tricky, part of what adds to the confusion, is that a lot of times we set this goal of learning every possible note on the neck. You know, we don't actually know why we're doing it. What are we going to gain from learning the neck? To me, it's a little bit like when some guitar players decide they want to learn music theory. In my private teaching practice, I get these calls on a fairly regular basis where somebody will say, oh, they've been playing for, some number of years and they figure it's about time they learn some theory. And of course, that's a good idea, but the next question that I always want to ask is, what specifically do you plan to do with the theory that you're learning? Or, to put it another way, what aspect of your playing are you actually looking to improve? What specific skill are you trying to develop that you think learning theory will improve? And very often, whether it's learning theory or learning the neck or some combination of the two, because of course those things are quite related, most people don't actually know precisely why they actually want to learn it. They just have a sense that at some point they're supposed to learn it. It's almost like they have an ethical or a moral obligation to learn theory or learn the neck, or both. But with that in mind, if you're really thinking about trying to learn the neck, the first thing I want you to do is ask, why do I want to learn the neck? What am I going to get out of it? And I want you to try to be as specific as possible. Because really, learning the neck can be pretty overwhelming. And there are all these different methods out there. I'm sure you've heard of a bunch of them, the cage system and a number of other systems as well, that are intended to help people learn and understand the neck. And if these methods are working for you, they're perfectly valid. If these methods are working for you, by all means, keep using them, keep working on them. But to me, the problem that I see with a lot of these methods is that the people they're intended to help, more or less, shall we say, intermediate level players, sometimes have difficulty applying those methods. And, on the other hand, the people that would be really comfortable applying those methods kind of probably don't need them, or advanced players don't really need those methods, okay? So here's my proposal to you today that'll hopefully make learning the neck much, much easier. Instead of trying to learn some big overarching system, instead of trying to learn the neck all at once, try learning the neck in smaller bites by practicing very specific things, okay? In essence, I want you to make a habit of practicing the actual skills you want to attain rather than simply trying to learn some big system or trying to memorize all the notes at once. When you think about it, it's actually 180 degrees from what a lot of people do. A lot of people get this idea that they need to learn the neck. They try to learn it all at once. And what I'm suggesting to you today instead is that you identify the skills that you want to develop that are the reason for your wanting to learn the neck in the first place. And you're going to focus on those skills. And if you practice and you study these skills the right way, you'll learn the neck simply by practicing the skills, okay? And you stand a much greater chance of really learning and really being able to apply the knowledge and really retaining the knowledge over a long term if you do it this way. At every stage, you're going to be focused on using the knowledge that you're gaining, okay? So again, this to me is somewhat of a better system because the emphasis is always on application and retention, retaining the knowledge that you're building, okay? So let's think about some of the skills that most rock, pop, blues, country, whatever guitarists want to gain that we feel learning the neck will help us with, okay? I think for a lot of us players, a lot of rock, pop, whatever players, two very related skills are being able to really use our bar chords all over the neck and also to use our scale fingerings all over the neck as well. And I say these two skills are related because in each case, in order to do those things effectively, you really need to learn the notes on the 5th and the 6th strings. You don't really need to know every last note everywhere on the neck. okay? The reason that we focus on the 5th and the 6th strings is because that's where our bar chords are rooted. That's where the root note is. And that's also where our scaled fingerings are rooted, on either the 5th or the 6th string. And honestly, you know, depending on what you want to accomplish, there's that critical why question again. Depending on what you want to accomplish, learning the 5th and the 6th strings may actually be all you need. And if that's the case, that's totally fine. And by just focusing on the 5th and the 6th strings, you're honestly saving yourself a lot of frustration and a lot of unnecessary work. But putting that off to the side, how are we going to learn the notes on the 5th and the 6th strings? We're going to use our bar chords and our scales, okay? So I want to say at the outset, I'm going to assume for purposes of this video that you know a few things. I'm going to assume that you know your basic root 5 and root 6 major and minor bar chord shapes. I'm going to assume that you know at least a couple of scales. One scale rooted on the 6th string, another scale rooted on the 5th string. And finally, and this is very important, I'm assuming that you're very, very comfortable with the chromatic scale. Remember, chromatic scale is like, you know, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, all the 12 notes that make up Western music, okay? If you're not familiar with the chromatic scale, or if you're not comfortable with it, I did a video recently on the chromatic scale. I'm going to put the link to that video in the description to this video below. But you must be really comfortable with both sharp notes and flat notes as they appear in the chromatic scale, okay? So moving on from there, and assuming that you're comfortable with your chromatic scale, that you know your root 6 and your root 5 bar chords, that you know a couple of scales rooted on the 5th and the 6th strings, we can get to work, okay? And two pretty easy ways to improve your knowledge of the neck, as I said, learn a bunch of songs that use bar chords, and also use a scale or a couple of scales to improvise in a variety of keys. So for example, I can play a simple blues sequence in B minor, you know, very similar to the chords that B.B. King used in the song The Thrill Is Gone. And I can play B minor here at the 2nd fret, root note on the 5th string, it's a minor chord, it's B minor. When I move it up to the 7th fret, still root note on the 5th string, so that's E minor. And I'm reminding myself, that's a B. I'm reminding myself, that's an E. And I can do this very same thing later on in the song. You get a G or a G7, root 6 bar chord at the 3rd fret, rooted on the 6th string. And I remind myself, that's a G. Then do an F sharp. I remind myself, that's an F sharp, okay? And so on. So as I'm playing my basic bar chord sequence, whatever it happens to be, I'm super focused on the root notes. And I'm really internalizing, you know, this is a B, this is an E, this is a G, and so forth. So really just learn a bunch of bar chord songs and be really mindful, really focused on the root notes. And if you do that, in essence, you'll be teaching yourself the 5th and the 6th strings. And again, if you do it this way, you're going to retain this knowledge much more effectively than just by learning some system, you know, that may not come all that easily to you, okay? Well, I mentioned scales as well. Identify a couple of scales, put on some backing tracks, and jam out, okay? You can do this with a simple pentatonic scale. Here I am in A minor, root note on the 6th string at the 5th fret. Course. But if I move it down to G at the 3rd fret, well, now I'm playing in G minor. And I can move it all around the 6th string, changing keys as I go, relying on my chromatic scale to help me navigate. Similarly, I've got this root 5 pentatonic scale, root note on the 5th string, A minor is at the 12th fret. But if I move it down 2 frets, I'm playing G minor. And at all times, once again, I'm reminding myself, this is A, this is G, and so forth, okay? I'm teaching myself where the notes are on the 5th and the 6th strings just by playing, okay? I'm always mindful of that root note, okay? So again, you can be practicing really learning and retaining this knowledge of the 5th and the 6th strings just by playing a bunch of bar chord songs and by moving your scales, whether it's pentatonic scales, diatonic scales, whatever, all over the neck, being super mindful of the root notes, okay? And as I said, this may be all that you need But if you want to go even deeper, well, then the first thing we need to do is figure out a way to, we're going to be focused. We already learned strings 6 and 5 in theory, so what about strings 1 through 4? Well, again, why do we want to learn those strings? Okay? What sort of skills do we want to acquire that would require us to know the 1st through 4th strings? And there's a lot of different skills, but I'm going to very roughly say that we can identify 3 skills, okay? And those 3 skills are going to be to find non-bar chord shapes, to improvise freely across the neck without actually relying on a given scale position, and finally to use different sort of synthetic scales, jazz scales, altered scales, whatever you want to call them, that don't neatly fit into a scale fingering that you may already know, okay? So taking those in turn, for example, we may want to become proficient at finding, as I said, non-bar chord shapes. Hey, here's a really nice G major triad in 1st inversion right here. That's nice. And we want to find chords like that all over the neck. Or we may want to be able to improvise freely, as I said, without being confined to any of our specific scale positions. You know, I can do a simple passage in G minor across one string, something like this. I don't know. Okay, obviously I wasn't in a specific scale fingering position, okay? We may want to play a variety of scales, as I said, that don't fit neatly into a diatonic scale pattern that we already know. If I want to play, let's say, in the harmonic minor scale, very similar to a regular minor scale, but I have to raise the 7th scale degree. So if I'm playing in A minor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G is my 7th scale degree. It's got to become G sharp. And of course, in order to do that, I need to know where the G's and the G sharps are. Okay, so that's one example, okay? So again, I really want to emphasize the best approach is one that allows me to practice the actual skill that I want to attain rather than just relying on memorization or some complicated system, so to speak, okay? Now, there's tons of drills that I could give you to help bring this about, but I'm going to give you just 1 or 2 exercises for each skill that we just named and identified to give you an idea of how you want to move forward, okay? In the space of a 10 or 15 minute YouTube video, I can't give you every last drill, of course. The goal here today is to chart a path forward, okay? Chart a path forward and shorten that path, okay? Find a very direct route to the skills that we want to attain, okay? So in terms of learning chord shapes up the neck, well, one of the things you're going to find is that different chord shapes will have the root note on different strings. So for example, here's a D major chord in what's called 1st inversion, and the root note is actually on the 2nd string. And I can move it up the neck in the key of D major, playing chords that are in D major, you know, D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, etc. And I'm going to keep an eye on the 2nd string because that's where the root note is. And I'm reminding myself, okay, 2nd string, here's a D note. Okay, 2nd string, here's an E note. Root of my E minor chord. Here's an F sharp note at the 7th fret. There's my F sharp minor chord. Here's a G note. Back to the major shape, and so on and so forth. And I'm eyeballing that root note once again. Okay? Or just one other quick example. I can take this F chord. It's our basic F chord, top 4 strings really of an F major bar chord, root 6 bar chord. But I can move this up, and the root notes are actually on the 4th and the 1st strings. So I can say to myself, okay, eyeballing the 4th string and or eyeballing the 1st string, F major. Okay, here are my G's now, G minor. Okay, here are my A's now, A minor. Hey, here's a B flat major, and so on and so forth like that. Now, if you're not comfortable with the chord scales, that's a whole major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. If you're not comfortable with that, whatever. Don't worry about it. Just play some basic, simple 3-4 chord songs, and that's really valuable as well. So going back to my D major 1st inversion shape, maybe I do a simple chord sequence like D major to G major to E minor to A major. Again, I've got my eye on the root note on the 2nd string, D major, all the way up to here, G major, Down here, here's my E note on the second string, E minor. All the way up to here, here's my A note on the second string, A major. So if you're not comfortable with the chord scales, that's another way to do it. Maybe if you get to this point, D major, G major, E minor, A major, you can start blending the shapes. Like I just did the two different shapes. So now we got D major, G major, the other shape, E minor, A major. You get the idea, okay? The bottom line is the goal is always to be practicing and learning with an eye towards actually using what you're actually learning, staying focused on those root notes, okay? So that's chords all over the neck. What about learning to improvise without relying on specific scale fingerings, but rather improvising across the neck freely? Well, a great way to get it is to practice your scales one string at a time, okay? And you can actually turn it into a picking exercise, you know, multiple birds with one stone, as they say, you know. I can just say C major, and I start on the lowest fretted note, which is F, and I can work my way up the neck. And I'm just going F, A, G, A, and then G, B, A, B, and then A, C, B, C, working my way up as high as I want to go. Well, guess what? When I do that, I'm programming myself where the notes are on the neck, okay? Or just one more example with kind of scales up the neck. I can do a scale with double stops, maybe D major, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp. I can do two string double stops. And you use these in your playing all the time. So once again, you're going to be applying what you're learning. Moving quickly, if I want to play some kind of jazz scale, some kind of synthetic scale, whatever you want to call it, as I said earlier, if I'm going to play A harmonic minor, where my G notes have to become G sharps, I've got to know where it is. There's that G sharp. Okay? I can do it out of that basic scale fingering. Now, of course, I move it around to different keys. What about D harmonic minor? D, E, F, G, A, B flat. The seventh tone is C. It becomes C sharp. D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C sharp, D. Or if I don't want to use that fingering, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C sharp, D. Okay? That's the idea. Or I can do my single string scale. Staying in D minor for a moment. I'm on an F down here, F, A, G, A, etc. I have to play a B flat there because I'm in D minor now. Got to stretch a bit. I've got A and B flat and C sharp now. B flat to C sharp to D. C sharp to D to E, etc., 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 okay? In a nutshell, what you want to take away from this video is that you don't have to learn everything all at once. Don't try to learn some big system that's going to overwhelm you. These promises that this system or that system will unlock the neck for you. What I think is much more useful, much more accessible, much easier to implement is to identify what skills you really want to gain, and then by practicing these skills, you are in fact learning the neck. It's actually flipping things around. Instead of learning the neck so that you can do certain things, you do those certain things, and by virtue of doing them, you learn the neck, okay? Last thing, again, I think that's way more beneficial because you're applying the knowledge that you're getting at all times, and because you're applying it, you're going to stand a much greater chance of retaining that knowledge, okay? Identify what you want to do and practice those skills. And keep an eye on those root notes, and you'll find yourself learning and understanding the neck very quickly and very effectively in a way that you can really apply your skills, okay? That's all I got for you today. As always, please hit the subscribe button. We've got a lot of great content here, and there's more content coming all the time. Also, please leave me a comment. I really believe we're building a community here, and I really believe that in this community, we don't always have to agree on every last little thing. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. Leave a comment. and we can all learn from each other. And that's a very, very valuable thing. It will enrich all of our respective guitar journeys, okay? Thanks for watching. Have a great day.